Good evening and welcome to the Cover One Roundup. I am your host, David Fox. With me, as usual, is UberHansen. We are here today live to talk about a very unfortunate loss that the Bills had last night against the Baltimore Ravens, losing 35-10 in their third primetime game in 4 weeks. We did in fact wait all day for Sunday night, and not only was I sleepy for most of that game, but I also got to witness a terrible loss. So just thumbs up all around for me. Yeah, not a fun game, not a great game, not even a particularly entertaining game unless you were a Ravens fan or a Bills hater. So just a not great experience overall. But it is what it is. And honestly, once you saw that opening play go for a touchdown, you kind of got the sense of what happened for the rest of that game. So not fun, but you can't win them all. Uber, how are you after that disaster?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to take the blame for the loss. I went a little too hard on Saturday. I was ridiculously hungover all day yesterday, so I couldn't do any of my, normal traditions I do before the game started. Thus, I think I jinxed it. I think I'm the reason. Me alone is the reason we lost. Not Joe Brady, not Tyler Bass, not the lack of a defensive line or offensive line. Me, because I didn't do all of the drinking I was supposed to do before that game started.
There is a certain level of like egotism and narcissism that you're pulling off here that is so like perfect and emblematic of modern sports fandom. I kind of love it. I'm not gonna lie.
I have no shame. I don't regret stating what I just said. I only regret drinking about 8 too many beers on Saturday.
I feel like that might be the first time in your life you've ever said anything like that before. I regret drinking too much.
It honestly might be, which is kind of sad.
Oh man, this is the kind of night we're in for, folks. Before we get too deep into things, though, we do have to thank our wonderful sponsors, which includes many of you fine folks. And if we hold on, I gotta shift my chin. There we go. All right. So if you are a Cover One Pass subscriber, first of all, thank you so much for supporting Cover One and for your continued support of Cover One. If you are not a One Pass subscriber, what are you doing? It's the best way to enjoy Buffalo Bills football. It's probably some of the best way you can enjoy football, period, because of all the incredible analysis and takes and the community that is built on Discord now, where not only do you get all sorts of football talk, you get all sorts of other talk. You get music, you get TV, you get politics, if that's something you enjoy torturing yourself with. It's all sorts of stuff, food, pets, anything you want to talk about. And honestly, if there's something you want to talk about, make a channel. There'll be other people that want to talk to you about it in all likelihood. So it's $60 a year. It's the best football content you'll get. It's the best Bills content for sure that you'll get. And it's just it's the best way to support us and all the things that we do here. I can't possibly sell this enough. And we are always so appreciative of all the people that support us through One Pass. And if all of that isn't enough, you get a free shirt from 26 Shirts if you've not looked up who they are and what they do and all the things that they are doing in their community. Go check it out. It's totally worth it. And any sort of shirt you get from them is one you'll love and treasure for a long time. And you get some other extra stuff from Cover One as well. And it's 100% worth it. It's the best $60 you'll spend on football all year. No doubt in my mind about that. Sign up today, and thanks for supporting us along the way. All right, let's see what we got here. So Roy Collins says Bass made a 50-yard field goal. How did we lose that game? Great question. I mean, if you had told me that Tyler Bass was going to make a 50-yard field goal, I'd be like, wow, things are really going well for the Bills tonight. They must really feel confident tonight. Unfortunately, that's not at all what happened. And of course, part of that was also Tyler Bass missing a 49-yard field goal later in that game, which was at that point probably the most predictable miss anyone could have thought to have happen.
Yeah, outside of the missed field goal in the playoffs last year, I think that one was pretty damn sure that there was no way he was making
fair.
that.
That's fair. RJ says that dumb game broke my soul. I don't believe that for a second. I feel like your soul has been broken years ago. Years ago. This is just like, if anything, this game kind of reminded you that you have a soul. And it just sort of like you know how in It's Always Sunny when Dennis is like, I'm starting to have feelings again. You remember feelings, right? And he's like, yeah, I have feelings every day of my life. Do you not have feelings? Yeah, that's the vibe I'm getting from this. Yeah. Roy Collins says, going back to last season and so far this season, when my ex comes over to watch the game with me, they're 9-2. She couldn't make it last night. What kind of weird voodoo does your ex have over the Buffalo Bills? I'm very curious about this now. I don't like this. First of all, it's very weird that you're watching games with your ex, and we're not going to dive into that because I would rather not do any more
watching 11 games.
11 games. Like, I don't want to do any more armchair psychology than I already do in my life, so we're not going to dive too deep into that. But it's a little weird, dude. But also, if it's working, right? I mean, the real question is, how many playoff games have you watched with her? Which playoff games have you watched with her? That's a good
point.
We got to figure this out, though. Steve Noble says, I would get remarried, Roy. That might break it. We can't get too deep into this. I could develop like an entire 30-minute segment just dedicated to the lore behind Roy Collins and his ex and whatever kind of weird voodoo they have over the Buffalo Bills, but we don't have time for that tonight. RJ says, David, you're 100% correct. I know. I'm sorry. Steve Noble also says, Bass is like my golf game off the tee. Very good. Thank you. All right, I'll give that to you. All right, folks, we're gonna start off with some injury news. Starting off with Josh Allen. Josh Allen was reportedly sore after last night, which who can blame him, especially after the most ridiculous trick play call that could have ever been conceived. And we'll definitely get to that. We will absolutely get to that. Don't worry about that. We'll get to that. So Josh Allen is sore. Khalil Shakir is also reportedly sore. He did leave the stadium in a walking boot, so we'll see if that is just a precautionary measure or what. But we will see what happens there. He did play the rest of the game after getting hurt, so and was kind of their most consistent player outside of Josh Allen. So Taylor Rapp is in concussion protocol, which is not surprising. Connor McGovern is fine despite confusion from people inside the stadium on whether or not he was cleared. Very weird situation. And again, one of those things that happened early on where I was like, no, this game's just not going to happen, is it? This is just this is not going to go the Bills' way. Any other news or thoughts that you've seen before we get into this?
I mean, just on the injuries, I've seen a bunch of Ravens fans in particular talking about the hit Josh Allen took because he got lit up, and talking about how funny that is, or oh my God, he got destroyed. My thought on it is, there's 32 starting quarterbacks in the NFL. 31 of them don't get up from that hit and do not play for the remainder of that game. Maybe not the next week. There's only one that gets up, and we have the one that gets up. So that's the way that I took it, half glass full. And then as for the Connor McGovern thing, I've also never seen that. I don't understand. He went back in the game, and then the ref was like, no, dude, get out. I was like, that was, you said it. I was like, this isn't going to work. This game, there's no way. Because if that's happening, the vibes are off. Something's wrong. And I still don't understand what happened there. They seem to say, yeah, he had to go ahead from the neuro person on the sideline.
So it seems like the independent neuro specialist that is on the sideline cleared him from concussion. Not an issue. So he was like, cool, I'll get my helmet back. We'll go back into the game. And then I guess the league person or whoever is part of this whole process upstairs didn't get the memo and saw him go out, and he was like, nah, he wasn't cleared. It was all just very odd, and like my initial feeling was like, oh, the referees are like screwing things up, game management again. But then it was like, I actually don't think this is the referee's fault. I think I think they were literally just like being the messenger in that case, and there's not really anything they could have done about that. It's just a very weird situation all around. Did not enjoy that at all.
No.
Let's talk about the Bills offense first. Josh Allen was fine. It obviously was not his best game. It was not the Bills' best game, period. I would be hard-pressed to find a whole lot of good that came out of this. Josh Allen was fine. I would not say that I'm going into this next game saying, oh, they found something out about Josh Allen, or they're gonna, it's like he's still Josh Allen. He'll be fine. This was just a bad game from the Bills, period.
Yeah, I didn't leave that game in any way thinking, oh no, what is Josh? What's happening with him? If anything, I left that game just as confident, if maybe even like somehow a little bit more specifically when it comes to Josh Allen, because he had that one throw that should have been picked by Nate Wiggins. The fumble, like, yeah, it's on him, but at the same time, like that trick play was so stupid. And then outside of that, like, he was delivering some strikes, including one to Kincaid early on that should have been caught, was dropped, and one to Keon Coleman, which is like, that's why you're here, dude. Like, and I just keep thinking about that. Like, if Keon Coleman catches that ball, the Bills score minimum 3 points on that drive. Like, the game changes because of those. And I'm not saying the Bills would win, but it seemed like the big plays they just kept messing up on. And as far as Josh Allen is concerned, like, he didn't do anything wrong, and he did a lot more right than wrong this game, where like the stat line doesn't necessarily show it, but I left that game like, yeah, the Bills played terribly. Josh is still Josh Allen.
Yeah. And I did see something today, which was just, I don't even know how to describe it other than this is the most Josh Allen-y sort of stat I could possibly imagine, which was from Next Gen Stats. Oh, yeah. Josh Allen was 0.9 yards away from the sideline when he threw a 52-yard completion to Khalil Shakir. Great play. Since entering the NFL in 2018, Josh Allen has completed 6 of 7 passes for 118 yards and 3 touchdowns within a yard of the sideline. The rest of the NFL since 2018 is 1 for 16. And I'm guessing that one is probably Mahomes.
I would think. I can't imagine anyone else doing it.
I mean, that's one of the most insane. Not to be clear, this is not a full yard. This is this specifically says within a yard. So less than a yard from the sideline. From sideline to sideline is 53 1/3, if I'm remembering my high school conditioning drills correctly. And that's just one of the most insane things that has happened. And honestly, I can recall like at least a couple of those throws too, which is maybe more ridiculous.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's just one of those where it's like there's no other quarterback that does this. Truly, literally, no other quarterback does this except like one time. It's insane.
It was Jalen Hurts. I don't know when it was Jalen Hurts, but
that's funny. That actually makes sense too. Jalen Hurts kind of has that same sort of, I don't know. I'm not 100%. I don't want to give up on a play mentality sort of thing.
Yeah.
But he also needs to give up on some plays. That's actually we're definitely not getting into Eagles talk. That set me on a bad path. Yesterday afternoon, because that was the first game I watched, and that was not fun either. Yeah, that was interesting. So Josh Allen was fine. This has obviously been a very run-focused team early on in the season, and unfortunately, because of the way that the game played out and it just got away from them so quickly, they just could not get the run game going because they were behind so early and so quickly. It just sort of became impossible for them to get into the rhythm that they wanted to, and it just forced them to throw the ball more, and it forced the Bills to become one-dimensional, which is not what they want to do in 2024.
Yeah, it really just was like the flow of the game was the exact worst thing that could have possibly happened to the Bills, and James Cook became essentially a non-factor, which really limited the Bills from an offensive standpoint because the Ravens essentially knew like you have to throw it so they can send blitzes without having to be concerned that the Bills are going to hand it off on some weird draw play or something along those lines. So yeah, the run game was it didn't work well, but it didn't work well because of the way the game it kind of played out. I'm not, again, similar to Josh Allen, like leaving this game, I'm not concerned with the run game going into, say, Houston or in the future. It just was one of those games where you just couldn't run the ball. It didn't make sense to run it almost.
Yeah, it got to a point where it's like, if you're going to try to get back into this game, like we know you can run the ball, but at this point you just can't. Like it's not something that you should be doing unless you're just getting like a really solid look and you can get, 8 yards. I don't know. It was just tough. It was a very difficult game from that particular point of view. Let's see. Going back to our initial conversation, is my psychoanalysis free? It is, unfortunately. And it is well worth every non-penny that you will pay for it. So keep that in mind. RJ says, not the reason for the loss, but that ref crew was significantly biased towards the Ravens. One of many examples was when Matt Collins got tackled on a play and wasn't called. If by significantly biased towards the Ravens, you mean that they were the ones who got more penalties, you would be correct in that sense. Because the Ravens, I believe, were penalized 8 times for 79 yards, and the Bills were penalized 4 times for 38 yards. And which tracks for the Ravens this year, who have, like, coming into that game, were the most penalized team in the NFL. Mm-hmm. And I would think was kind of one of the main reasons why they lost that week 2 game to the Raiders in particular. And obviously that first game against the Chiefs was kind of messy. Just the first game is always messy, right? So you don't take too much into that. But that week 2 and probably week 3 against the Cowboys, Ravens are a very penalized team. It is what it is.
Yeah, and I like, there's certain games I've watched, Bills, non-Bills, where I'm like, oh man, the bias is pretty, and I don't even think it's like on purpose. It just happens to flow that way. I didn't feel that way at all again with this game yesterday. I didn't really think much about the refs outside of early on when Smoot got called for the knee to the helmet, which he should have, because that was a ridiculous play. And what
he thought he could get away with it.
Yeah,
and I mean, it's just like, it was the most, like, it reminded me of just like, God, that's so high school football, right? You like, it's just to like try and knee someone on your way up and be like, oh, I didn't do it. It's like, come on, guy. What are we doing here?
Yeah, that was lame. The Ravens didn't get called, which is still kind of a ridiculous thing that happened. They pulled Josh Allen's helmet off in the pile, and then somebody came in helmet first right towards his head. Like, that was, I saw that happen early on. I was like, I didn't just witness that. Like, I didn't actually see that. And then like the replays came out on Twitter shortly after, and I was like, what is this? Like, he pulls the helmet off and then goes flying in head first. It's like, that's kind of messed up. That doesn't get called. But again, the refs were, if the refs were the reason the Bills lost, they'd be the umpteenth, millionth, whatever reason the Bills lost. They had nothing to do with this loss. They just missed that one call. Other than that, I thought it was a pretty fairly called game.
Which is what RJ is saying here. There, he's not trying to blame the loss, obviously. Roy Collins says it was reported that the Ravens were susceptible to the pass. It didn't look like it last night. Well, Okay. Always the most inopportune time. It was reported that the Ravens were susceptible to the pass. Didn't look like it last night. Yeah, that's what happens when you're forced to only pass. Like if you can run the ball and do play action off of that, cool. Yeah, it's hard to defend the pass. When you have to be a drop back quarterback at 100% of the time from like the middle of the first quarter on, yeah, pass defense gets a little easier when you can do that. Yeah, not fun. Spin 0481 says our O line played like crap. Both lines did not play well. Both the offense and the defensive line got worked over by the Ravens, and that was very clear and obvious early on, and it just didn't really change throughout the game. And we can kind of talk about the offensive line in particular. I mean, they just got overwhelmed from start to finish, it seemed like.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that was so frustrating about it is that, like, the Ravens basically just had a perfect game plan against the Bills where they were sending blitzes in the exact right spots, and then they were just winning one-on-one matchups, which is so opposite of what we've seen the first 3 weeks. And outside of the Cardinals game, the Bills have played some really good pass rushers, whether that's Zach Seiler, Jalen Phillips, Josh Allen, Travon Walker. Like those are all pretty good pass rushers. And arguably, I'd say those are better than maybe anyone the Ravens have, though. Namdi's pretty good, and Kyle Van Noy is having the season of his life. So I don't know. It just was one of those games. The Bills' offensive line essentially didn't show up, and then the Ravens were sending blitzes that the Bills just were not prepared for at all. It was really, really frustrating. You're on mute.
Thank you. I believe I saw Eric tweeting out earlier something to the effect of Kyle Van Noy was like Melvin Ingram in this game. And I'm like, oh my God, that's exactly what it was. Yeah. That's exactly what it felt like. Like anytime Melvin Ingram has played the Bills in 2020 or beyond, he just finds a way to be an absolute irritant and make some stupid player too. And it's just like, that's exactly what happened with Kyle Van Noy. He also says, this was not Joe Brady's best game calling plays. No, it was not. And unlike maybe some past coordinators, Joe Brady was the first to admit that today, or maybe even last night. I can't quite remember, but there is a quote that I saw that was tweeted out by Alex Brasky, which said, Joe Brady on Bills offensive struggles versus the Ravens. I don't think we had a bad game plan. I think the game was called bad, which is a reflection of him and a direct reflection of him. And he is also correct, because that was not a well-called game. Nothing for the first 3 weeks, right? We felt like this offense had a flow. It had a rhythm. It had like things felt connected to each other. It didn't feel disjointed. None of that last night. It was weird. It felt off. There was weird timing on stuff. Everything just did not happen the way that it needed to happen. Like, not even close.
Yeah, and I think like the main thing that people are going to focus on is the trick play, because the trick play was awful, but it was the entire game. Like nothing seemed to really make sense the entire game. Nothing was cohesive, which again, it goes back to how the game unfolded early on with the massive lead the Ravens built and Buffalo having to try to find a way to come back and couldn't really play the style of football they wanted. But going to that trick play, like the thing that gets me about it is, yeah, the Ravens won 35-10. They absolutely blew out the Bills. And I don't even think if the Bills didn't run that trick play, they necessarily keep it much closer. The Ravens were the better team yesterday, no matter what. That being said, in that moment when that trick play happened, the Bills had all of the momentum. It was 21-10. If they drive back down the field and score a touchdown, it's 21-17. Like it's a completely different game. It was so frustrating in the moment of that trick play as it was unfold. As soon as Josh Allen lined up to the left where he did, my thought was, what are we doing? What the hell are we doing? It made no sense in the flow of the game. It made no sense for the Buffalo Bills. Like, you don't line up Josh Allen on the outside like that. It was just so stupid and so unlike anything we've seen from Joe Brady, which makes it so frustrating. It's just a really, really bad and really, really poorly called offensive game by Brady.
Just to kind of highlight that trick play. So it's one thing to call that play, right? There are about 3 different, maybe 4 different ways that play could have and probably should have been stopped or aborted. The first is just not calling it, which it shouldn't have been called. Just straight up, don't call that play. No reason to call that play in that situation and in that moment. No sense at all. Second, maybe when Curtis Samuel gets the ball and sees that Josh Allen is like being actively chased by a defender, that he should just take the ball, run forward, get a yard or 2, if that. Don't worry about trying to force something. Okay. You don't do that. So you flip the ball to Josh Allen. Josh Allen now has a chance to say, oh, I'm getting pressured immediately. Mac Hollins is covered. I got to just throw this away or just eat it. Just don't try to make too much out of this. The other chance to do this would have been in the huddle, hearing the call and saying, screw that. That's dumb as fuck. Like, we're not doing this. Unfortunately, none of that happened. And what we got as a result was one of the most bizarre play calls and probably one of the worst results of a play call that you can possibly imagine. And I try very hard to be as objective and thoughtful when it comes to especially play calling, because that often becomes like a thing for people. Like, oh, well, the play calling was bad. Play calling was this. They should have called this, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, most of the time that's just sort of noise and frustration being vented out through catchphrases, right? And stuff that we kind of know about, even if we don't understand it. And that includes me. That all being said, all those caveats being put out there, it was so obvious as it was happening that this was a bad call.
Yeah.
Even if it had worked, which it had no chance of working based on how well every single aspect of that play was covered. Even if it did work, it's still not a good call, period.
So I actually had this thought in the moment, and then I saw somebody tweeted out this poll today. So I'm going to throw this to you. Worst trick play call, this or the Damar Hamlin fake punt?
Probably this one.
Yeah.
I think that I feel like the Damar Hamlin one gets kind of, is almost the result of memification. Like, it's a bad call, but I think because it was Damar Hamlin, it kind of gets over highlighted a little bit. Like this idea that like, oh, Sean McDermott thinks he's in a Disney movie or something. And it's like, I get it. But also that's not what this is. This was just bad. It's just bad and dumb, and nothing about it made any sort of sense. And it killed your momentum, and any chance of making it close or actually winning this game in a crazy comeback died on that play. Essentially, that was it.
Yeah, I mean, it died so many times. There were so many times that game where I'm like, well, maybe if they just do this, we'll be all right. And it died every time. And that though was the one where it's like, okay, well, I guess might as well pack it up. Later on in the game, a special teams blunder by the Bills also led me to have that feeling as well, though. So yeah, very, very frustrating game offensively, though.
It was not every aspect of this was pretty bad. Even Kincaid and Coleman, who made some good plays throughout. Kincaid's drop on 3rd and 2 on that first drive was brutal. Not going for it on 4th and 2 after that was also brutal.
Mm-hmm.
And then Keon Coleman gets a dime from Josh Allen.
Close.
I mean, right here. It was right here in against good coverage, and it just did not. He kind of turned himself around as he was running. Didn't kind of hesitated on how he wanted to catch it, and it just went right through him. And it was like, oh my God, it's happening again. I can't do this. And yeah, but that it was tough. Now, in fairness to both Kincaid and Coleman, Kincaid came back and made some consistent plays throughout. Keon Coleman made some really great catches, like the kind of catches that he is supposed to make. And that's all well and good, but it was kind of too little, too late for the most part.
Yeah, the Kincaid drop, that in that moment, even I felt like that was a big deal, and then it ended up being a big deal, which kind of stunk. And it's just like Kincaid's hands are so good, it just didn't add up, and it just fit the vibes of that early part of the game. But he played well for most of the remainder of the game until Marlon Humphrey decided to play poke the eye or whatever the hell you want to call it when he poked Kincaid in the eye, which was just so freaking dirty.
Gutless motherfucker. And I will say that on the record. Yeah. Marlon Humphrey is a gutless motherfucker.
To be completely honest, like, and same thing with Smoot on the Bills. They both deserve a 1-game suspension for what they did. I honestly think so.
Yeah.
Just because they're just so bush league, and it's just like neither of those plays are football plays at all. They're intent to injure is what they are. And that's just something's wrong with that, inherently wrong. But going back to Dalton Kincaid and Keon Coleman, the Keon Coleman drop, I think it was Nate Tyser, it was somebody like him on Twitter, who said you can see in the moment he can't decide if he wants to high point it or if he wants to go over the shoulder, and you can see his hands move. And to an extent, like, it was frustrating. I'm going to cut him a little bit of slack. He still has to catch that ball, but I'm going to cut him a little bit of slack. Rookie mistake, get better, improve. Like, don't make that mistake again. Just go high point it every time, Keon Coleman. That's what you are. You're this giant receiver with a massive vertical. Just high point it every time. But he also finished the game really well. That sideline throw was working over and over again. And that kind of points to what Josh Allen did yesterday. Like, he was pretty damn accurate for most of the games. And those throws he had to Coleman along the sidelines had to be perfect. If they weren't perfect, not only are they incomplete, but they're possibly picked because of how tight those windows were. Coleman made some great catches. Josh made some great throws. It just, again, the offense just didn't work holistically, and this is the result, 10-35 loss.
Yeah, it was tough. On the subject of the offense in general, Carl Toman says Joe Brady has been using pre-snap motion to give Josh tells about the defense. Last night, I didn't see any motion at all the entire game. Why not? Well, great question, to which we actually have a very good answer to this. So this was something that was brought up just kind of as part of the discourse throughout the game and especially afterwards. And our very lovely, I guess, he's okay, Aaron Quinn, of the Cover One flagship show. He dug into it, looked at the numbers. So in the first game of the season against the Cardinals, 53% motion in that game, 63% motion against the Dolphins in week 2, 50.8% motion against the who did they
Jaguars?
play? Jaguars, thank you. 50.8% motion against in that game. And I imagine some of that went down because they were just ahead by so much for most of that second half. Yeah. So and then in this game, 43.3%. So it's lower. It's not that they weren't using it at all, but it was lower. And part of the reason why it's lower is the fact that the Ravens are just a very zone-heavy team. And when you go against a zone defense or a zone-heavy defense, motion is only doing so much in terms of giving you tells about the defense. It might set something up, but it's not going to reveal anything that you don't already know about the defense. It's just a matter of with zone defense in particular, it's either you're matching what the offensive pass patterns are with your coverage, or you're playing spot drop and just making sure that you're not getting fooled by, you know, two crossers coming in front of you, or, you know, getting jammed by some high-low concept or whatever. And the Ravens, to their credit, are a really well-coached team. And so when stuff like that happens, it's like, hey, there's only so much you can do about it. If their goal is going to be, we're really talented and we can execute better than you, as the Bills, another very talented team that can execute, you have to execute. And not only did they not execute, but the play calling on top of that didn't help. But the idea that they either didn't use motion or that they just sort of went away from it or whatever is just not accurate, I would say. And that's sort of become, I want to quash that narrative as much as I possibly can.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say, like, in my initial watch of the game, my perspective was, to some extent, where's the motion? Though I didn't think it was as extreme as I was seeing on Twitter. But I also think our also lovely from Cover One, Eric, pointed out that, like, with motion also comes a reduction or increased confusion in your offensive line's pass protection sets. And the Bills were struggling so much with pass protection that they essentially were doing whatever they could to say, how can we protect Josh Allen? And that included at points lining up two guys in the backfield just to block, like Dawson Knox, and I forgot who lined up on the other side of him. They were in essentially like a wishbone with two guys in the backfield. They were blocking 4, maybe 5, maybe 6 with 7 guys because they simply couldn't block the Ravens. So it was just a disastrous called game. And I think Joe Brady kind of said it right. And you said it earlier in the show. He said that the game plan wasn't bad. It was just executed poorly, essentially. So it was frustrating all around. I think that the Bills fans who insist the sky is falling and that the Bills need to make a trade or the Bills need to do this, or then it was one game. Like, if this persists against the Texans and against the Jets and suddenly the Bills are 3-3 and their offense doesn't look good, then I'll start to come around on this idea that the offense is bad or the offense is struggling. But we saw them literally destroy 3 straight opponents and then just play a really bad game. And a game which, again, in the third quarter, they were on a drive to go within a score. Like, it's crazy how different this game could have been. And instead it's 35-10. And it felt like it was going to be 35-10 early on. And then in the third quarter, suddenly it was like, oh my God, the Bills might win this game. So it's just, I think the outcome is where people are really driving home. Like, they're like, oh, the Bills lost by 25. And my read on this is just a bad game. It's just a really bad game and it sucks, but go beat the Texans now. It solves all the problems.
Yeah. And kind of to address a point of another point of contention, another narrative.
Real quick, Will Levis just threw an interception.
Oh, I saw. Oh, okay. Yeah. Do you think I'm not watching? You think my addiction to football is preceded by my own show? Come on, man.
Please tell me it was a stupid, like, another memeable one.
Yes, it was. I think it was. I don't know who's 91 on the Dolphins. Is that Agba?
Yes.
Is it really? Yeah,
I think
so. He had it.
He's 51.
Okay. Whoever 91 is, he had it in his hands and then kind of had to trap it between his thighs. And yeah. Just another classic Will Levis moment, man.
I think the guy's a bozo.
We can't get enough of it, I'm telling you. Oh, man. All right. Yes. So this comment from Walter S. I feel like one of the most overrated areas of praise McDermott gets is being aggressive. Not all fourth downs are equal, and it shows we're playing in tight games where the offense struggles. So some other information about that. This from Aaron Schatz, the sort of godfather of football analytics, creator of DVOA. He said this today. Yesterday, I promised Bills Mafia fans that I would look into whether McDermott is more conservative against good teams. The answer is slightly. Jim Armstrong, who does the aggressiveness index, is busy, so I had to look into it myself with quick analysis. All right. I looked into 4th down plays with 1 to 3 yards to go from 2020 to 2023, removing plays with the Bills down by 2 or more touchdowns in the second half and any play in the final 5 minutes. Then separating the good and bad opponents simply based on whether the opponent had 9 or more wins that season. Against bad opponents, McDermott went for it 16 of 34 times, which is 47%. Against good opponents, McDermott went for it 37 of 84 times, which is 44%. In the regular season, McDermott was 45 for 101, which is 45%. And in the playoffs, McDermott was 8 for 17, which is 47%. So it's a quick analysis. There's more to kind of dig into this, maybe specific opponents, maybe particular matchups, injuries. At the end of the day, though, this is one of those things that kind of comes up and it doesn't really have that much basis around it. And I understand some of this is just frustration and maybe in a specific moment of a specific game, but extrapolating that and trying to make a full-blown narrative out of it, I don't love. I don't like. I think it's kind of bad faith criticism, honestly.
Yeah. Honestly, I think you could even go this year so far. It's felt like he's gone for it on 4th down a bunch. And I get the gripe with him not going in on 4th down on that second 4th down of the first drive, but he also went for it on the first 4th down. And so he's essentially 50% on that first drive alone. And if I have it correctly, I'm pretty sure against the Dolphins early on, they went for a 4th down on their own side of the field. Like, I think that there's a narrative that people want to draw. I think people want to draw it because he's a defensive head coach, and they essentially have connect directly to that. This idea that he's a defensive head coach and he's extremely conservative, when every single statistic and every single metric we have, whether it's advanced or regular, points to Sean McDermott being one of the most aggressive coaches in the NFL when it comes to these things. In fact, we were just talking about stupid, goofy ass trick plays and that the Bills faked a punt by giving it to Damar Hamlin in the playoffs on 4th down. It was a stupid play, but it was aggressive. So if the argument is Sean McDermott not aggressive enough? More often than not, he's one of the most aggressive coaches in the entire NFL.
And the other, I mean, I think you're right that some of this comes from him being a defensive head coach and just sort of assuming certain stereotypes about defensive head coaches. I think some of it is also just because he's not that interesting as a personality. Let's just call it what it is. He's kind of an odd conservative personality and just sort of a football obsessed guy, right? Like, and I think, again, there are certain stereotypes that come from that as well. And I think that there are people who kind of read into that a little too much and draw certain connections that aren't really there. And there are reasons to be critical of Sean McDermott, obviously. I mean, that any head coach is going to have issues and problems. I mean, my God, like Bill Belichick couldn't draft a wide receiver at any point of his tenure while he was with the New England Patriots. And like every coach has their weakness and problems, but I don't think that we need to kind of make a mountain out of a molehill. That's not even what this is. This is just kind of an odd narrative that has come from frustration and more particularly probably just frustrating losses in the playoffs in particular. Probably.
You just made me think this. If Sean McDermott had long, flowing, beautiful locks like Trevor Lawrence, I bet you no one would be talking about how aggressive or not aggressive he is. So I'm going
to start to keep a timer now of how long it takes for you to take some sort of shot at Trevor Lawrence on this
There's
show.
No shot here. I talked about how beautiful his hair is. I'm just saying, in this society we have that's so biased to us bald people, of course you're going to dislike Sean McDermott. And I love his beautiful bald head. Anyway,
where I thought this was going. When I brought this up, we went from quick statistical analysis to psychoanalyzing baldness.
we're doing a lot of psychoanalyzing today. We're talking about
We
ex-girlfriends.
don't do much
We're
of it.
talking
I
about
tried
hairstyles.
not to do it. Where is he? Where's Roy Collins? He started this. Let's have.
Yeah.
God, brutal. Anyway, we're gonna move on from this whole conversation. Let's talk about the Bills' defense, because they also were a problem in this game, and a big problem in this game. Like we said about the offensive line, the defensive line also got worked. It was so bad from the start, from the very first play, right? Just immediate got Ed Oliver got hit with a trap play, or a trap block rather. The offensive line climbed up to the second level and absolutely eliminated the linebackers. The safeties came too far upfield to try and chase him down. Just bad. Just bad. And it remained bad for most of the game. And then on top of that, coming out of the second half, they did really well, right? They did a really good job of coming out with energy and attacking and getting a stop early on. I mean, the blitz from Dorian Williams and him getting that, what should have been a sack and obviously ended up as a grounding call, was huge, right? To just immediately get a huge loss plus a loss of downs. Amazing job there, but there was only so much they could do, and they were just so overwhelmed. And honestly, this is the first time this season where, and obviously it's early on, but it was the first time where really you felt the losses that they've had at the second level, with Matt Milano, Terrell Bernard, and Terrence Johnson all being out.
Yeah, I mean, that first play is exactly that, right? Like, I'm pretty sure if you have Matt Milano and Terrell Bernard, one of them finds a way to at least fill that hole. And maybe Derrick Henry still gets a big game, but they're not going to get that giant gain. He's not going to run for 87 or 89, whatever the hell it was. But going to the defensive line in particular, like, I found myself this entire game feeling like I do in the playoffs when we play the Chiefs. And my biggest frustration every single time we play the Chiefs, and also in that Bengals game, is like, why can't our defensive tackles win in these games? And not to conflate this, because the Bills have won a lot of really big games in the regular season as well, and they've won a lot of games in the postseason. It just kind of fits how I felt against the Bengals, especially in 2023 postseason or 2022 postseason. Is like, we were playing backups and the Bills defensive line just couldn't do anything. And in this game, we're playing a backup guard or a right tackle that had to squeeze down into guard. And for most of the game, I was like, where is Ed Oliver? Where is Daquan Jones?
Yeah.
In fact, the best play I saw of any defensive lineman happened to be Dwayne Carter at the goal line, which subsequently that drive ended with a fumble by Derrick Henry that was recovered in the end zone by Patrick Ricard. Yeah. So of course that's how that drive ended too, but just really frustrating from a defensive line perspective. And the injuries just really, we've survived and done really well with the likes of Dorian Williams, Balen Spector, and Cam Lewis. They are nothing compared to Teron Johnson, Terrell Bernard, and Matt Milano. Like, Buffalo desperately needs one of them, at least one of them back, if not two, if not all three, if they're going to make a deep run in the playoffs. But they've survived and played pretty damn well these past few weeks. So again, a bad game made worse probably by injuries, but also made worse by just guys missing their assignments and making mistakes for most of the game on defense.
If you want a semi-positive spin on that particular situation, it's that of the guys that played in this game, Cam Lewis, Dorian Williams, Balen Spector, Dorian Williams is the one who played the best. And he's the one who's going to be playing the rest of the season, as opposed to Balen Spector, who will be replaced by Terrell Bernard when he comes back. as opposed to Cam Lewis, who's going to be replaced by Taron Johnson, who's coming back. So there's that, I guess. I'm trying here.
I was legitimately impressed with Dorian Williams. Outside, he makes stupid mistakes just because he messes up his assignment. And that first play, he just completely messed up. Like, he got too far inside. And then on the touchdown to Justice Hill, I don't know what he thought he was going to do. He was going to try to stop him from going inside. And Hill's just like, I'm going to go score a touchdown easily here. But other than that, when he's coming downhill, he's very good. And that showed in the second half. So Dorian Williams, kind of an arrow up for me compared to where I had him going into that game.
Yeah. Not much to say about the corners. They weren't really active in this game. I mean, the first drive or two, especially that first drive, I don't think there was a straight up drop back for Lamar. I think obviously the first drive was just the 87-yard touchdown run, but the second drive, I mean, it was a lot of running, and then it was a lot of really quick stuff and screens, a lot of screens early on. And so that was just in some ways, it just sort of eliminated the corners as a whole, and not entirely, obviously, but in sort of how they want to play, because the Bills are capable. Christian Benford and Rasul Douglas are very capable of playing, especially against those receivers, right? Like, I mean, it's not like Baltimore's receivers are some world beaters. Zay Flowers is good, but he's not gonna destroy an entire game plan himself. So there's not really much to say about the corners, the safeties. Really rough fits coming from depth on that touchdown run to start. Obviously, Rapp being injured is not great. And, I think when you look at that and say, oh, of course, Taylor Rapp got injured with a concussion. But you look at the play and it's like, I mean, this is for a long time how teams taught tackling, was to do exactly what he did. The unfortunate part is that it's at this point starting to become a bit outdated, and for that exact reason, right? It's because you end up landing on your head and kind of compressing it in such a way that you're susceptible to something like that. And if you get your head on the other side, like a rugby player does, it's not as common. It's not as likely to have that happen. I felt like Cole Bishop seemed fine. I think that's fine. Yeah. Right. I mean, I didn't see anything too crazy one way or the other from him. So, like we say a lot during the preseason, as long as you look like you belong, that's what matters. So I've seen like Cole Bishop's was fine in that. Mike Edwards, so he was injured, a back problem. Am I remembering this correctly?
I don't know. I thought he was just a healthy scratch, but I could be wrong.
Let me have my my producer look this up, because this is something I'm curious about. Let's see. I don't see any sort of information about this. So maybe it was just a healthy scratch. I don't know. And if that's the case, then he's not going to be a healthy scratch next week. So that much we know. Any other kind of thoughts about the secondary?
Yeah, I mean, just two thoughts in general is it was really well game planned by the Ravens. Just looking statistically, of the 13 passes that Lamar Jackson completed, 9 of them went to running backs. And why did they go to running backs? Is because the Bills linebackers were the ones covering the running backs. So they essentially said, we're going to take those 2 corners who are really, really freaking good in Christian Benford and Rasul Douglas. We're going to take them out of the game. We're not going to allow them to affect this by using players that they generally aren't going to cover. And it worked extremely well. Lamar was extremely efficient through the air. As for the Cole Bishop part of this discussion, again, kind of a glass half full idea here. Here's to hoping Taylor Rapp gets better and gets better quick, because his veteran presence back there is meaningful. He is a good safety, regardless of what a lot of people want to say about him. But I am intrigued about Cole Bishop now getting a lot more playtime. Maybe Cole Bishop starting next week, and then suddenly we're looking at Cole Bishop quickly ascend and become the player I think we all think he could be, or we all want him to be. And if Cole Bishop suddenly is this really, really good safety in a few weeks when Taylor Rapp's ready to come back and play, then you have to ask serious questions about who are your two starting safeties.
Yeah. And yeah, it's not an ideal situation, but I think we said this before the season started, that whatever combination of safety they rolled out there, we would be fine with. And I'm kind of still of that belief. I understand there are people who still feel like Damar Hamlin is a Make-A-Wish Foundation type of player or whatever, which is kind of insulting to him and the stuff that he did before he died in 2022 and had to fill in for Micah Hyde when he got hurt. I'm not gonna sit here and say that that Damar Hamlin is some incredible player or anything like that. He is who he is, but he's a perfectly adequate safety who does what he needs to do the majority of the time. I'm not gonna overreact one way or the other about Damar Hamlin on this roster. That being said, since I brought up Micah Hyde, I believe Sean McDermott alluded to saying, like, hey, we might get to a point where we call up Micah Hyde and see what he wants to do for this season.
I just hope they do. I just hope they don't. I love Micah Hyde. I hope
they don't have to.
I hope they don't. If they have to, like, if another injury happens to safety, then maybe I'm like, all right, let's call Micah. But I am terrified about his neck. I love Micah Hyde. He's one of my favorite Bills probably in my lifetime, but I think it's time for him to go enjoy the rest of his life as opposed to come back to the Bills. That being said, if the Bills announced that they had signed Micah Hyde, I'm sure I would be jumping for joy. So who am I to say that Micah should go enjoy his life?
Fair enough. Talk briefly about Bills special teams. So Tyler Bass makes his first 50-yard field goal of the season and followed it up later by missing a 49-yard field goal. So par for the course for Tyler Bass in 2024, if you ask me.
It was so, and the miss was so bad. It was so bad. He just right away, as soon as his foot hit it, you just knew it started going left right away. It wasn't even close. And I've been trying to avoid hopping on the I'm super concerned with Tyler Bass. I'm now to a point where I start to say maybe it's time to bring somebody else in. Just because
they had tryouts a week ago.
I can't try, like, he in that moment, right? And I don't think the Bills win if he makes it. But if he makes it, it's a 2-possession game. He missed it, the game was over. Like that, the game was literally over the second he missed it. If he makes it, the Bills have a legitimate chance at least. And it just is so sad to see a player with so much talent just seemingly can't put it together now. He's got the yips. He's got the yips.
Yep. And it's not great. And I think that we're going to be nearing a point, especially if he misses kicks in high leverage moments, which I think is something that we talked about before the season started when we were discussing Tyler Bass, of like, what is it going to take for Tyler Bass to not be on this team? And I think we both kind of agree that it's like, if he misses a lot of kicks in high leverage moments, that would be the thing to pull the trigger. And I don't think we've really reached that point yet. And the Bills are already like considering this because of they had tryouts a couple weeks ago. So I think that their patience is wearing thin with Bass. And I think that they are not looking at him as a sunk cost. I think they are willing to sit here and say, like, this is what it is, and we gotta get rid of it if we have to.
Yeah. And I just Googled free agent kickers because I'm like, is there anybody I could think of? And there is news out today, and I am not advocating for the Bills signing this guy because I think he's a piece of human garbage. But Brandon McManus is a legitimate NFL kicker. He's a legitimate NFL kicker who played in Denver for a very long time. And Denver is that outdoor, can be cold, can have weather. Like, you could kind of
thin air.
Connect it. Thin air, true. Yeah, so you can kick it much further, and played in Jacksonville last year. But he's a player where if the Bills signed him, you could make a legitimate argument off the jump that Brandon McManus is better than Tyler Bass. Again, not advocating for it, but after this game where we saw Tyler Bass struggle again, and now the Bills are probably looking more thoroughly at kickers and saying, who can we bring in? The one kicker probably on the market right now where they know they can bring him in and he's probably better. And Sam Martin used to hold for him.
Fair point. Fair point.
So Brandon McManus might end up in a Bills jersey. Again,
we're not
seemingly
advocating for this. Yeah. For a lot of reasons. But yeah. Speaking of Sam Martin, he was fine, right? He was fine.
Yeah.
There was nothing where I was like, bad Sam Martin. He was fine. Whatever.
Yeah.
Codrington muffed a punt, didn't lose the ball, but like that almost sort of seems like another thing of just like, well, another thing to go wrong for the Bills. It didn't seem like this was something to be overly concerned about. And Codrington has actually done a pretty good job as a returner so far this season. So, yeah.
Yeah, I like Codrington. Like watching him return, watching the way he runs, he's got that like, oh gosh, he's going to break one at some point. Like,
right.
I remember like prime Andre Roberts was like that a little bit. Like,
yeah.
Codrington looks a little bit better because he looks a little quicker and fat. He's going to break one at some point this season.
At some point.
Yeah.
All right. Do we want to talk about the Texans at all?
I mean, I'd love to go 4-1. That'd be nice.
That would be nice. And we've talked about plenty of other teams on this show before the season started, and even a little bit during. We were kind of like lukewarm-ish about the Texans offseason as a whole, just because it seemed like whatever talent they let go of or didn't bring back, they replaced, but didn't necessarily like change or like really upgrade the roster in a significant way from what a 10-6 team was the year before. And so when everyone else, when a lot of people were ready to crown the Texans as like, they're in their Super Bowl window, which I think is true, right? I mean, you have a legitimately great quarterback in his second year, like and it's a good team overall. So I think it's fine to call them in a Super Bowl window. That being said, it seemed like people were like really having to pull themselves back from saying they would be in the Super Bowl this year. And you look at this team right now, they're 3-1, and they've kind of struggled to get to 3-1. There's been penalties. There's been some sloppy play. They had a really good rushing attack in week 1 against the Colts. But now that we're a month into the season, it seems like that's more a result of the Colts run defense just being putrid than it is the Texans run game actually being better than what it was last year.
Mm-hmm.
And they traded for Joe Mixon in order to get a better run game. And it kind of looks, I mean, not largely the same because I think Mixon is better, but it's not such a significant upgrade. And overall, I don't know. This kind of seems like a team that's going to go like 10-7, 11-6.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I watched that Texans Jaguars game yesterday, and this was just all right. I'm going to hate on Trevor Lawrence for a second because yet again, Trevor Lawrence can't get the thing done. Like the Jaguars won that game. They should have won that damn game. Trevor Lawrence just sucks. He's terrible, and he couldn't find a way to lead them to victory by the end of that game. So the Texans somehow come away with a victory when in reality they should be 2-2. But that's besides the point. I will say one thing I noticed, and I've tried to Google it and see if I could find any reports on it. There was a lot of footage in that game where they were zooming in on CJ Stroud and he was flexing his hand a lot. That's just one thing I noticed, and I haven't seen anything about it. So who knows?
Joe Burrow starts playing well despite his messed up hand, and now we're shifting hand gate to another quarterback.
It could, yeah. I didn't see him try to pick up a water bottle, so I can't really tell you how good, how hurt or possibly hurt he is. But I mean, if you watch the Texans play the Jaguars yesterday, I don't think you leave that game with thinking about the Texans as like, oh my gosh, they're so good. Yeah, they won, but they didn't win remotely convincingly. They should have lost the game. And as banged up as the Jaguars were when they played the Bills, they were more banged up yesterday against the Texans. So it'll be really interesting. The Texans are coming off a win where they shouldn't have won, and the Bills are coming off getting demolished. It's going to be a good game. It's going to be a fun game and a spicy game. I'm sure CJ Stroud is going to try to get Diggs the ball and feed him. My hope is that the Bills essentially are like, we know that Diggs is going to get fed this game because that's just the personality he has. Let's use that to our advantage. And there's ways they can use it to their advantage.
I am hoping for a sort of Terrell Owens playing against Philly for the first time when he was on the Cowboys, and he did nothing in that game, and he had a drop. His exit from Philly was very dramatic. If you're not old enough to remember the driveway workout with a helicopter circling around his home and news reporters like following him while he's doing crunches in his driveway. Pretty brutal exit from Philly, like to the point where they straight up deactivated him like halfway through his second year because they just couldn't deal with him anymore. It never got that bad with Stephon Diggs.
No.
But it was clear, based on the fact that they just gave him to the Texans and were willing to eat a lot of salary cap to do it. I mean, things just obviously reached a boiling point with Diggs and the Bills. So I think that the Bills will make an effort of some degree to eliminate Stephon Diggs from this game. How much of that will that matter? I don't know, because Nico Collins is a really good receiver.
Yeah, that's a problem.
That was another thing watching that game yesterday. It was like, oh my God, he's still good. Like, there was part of me that wondered, like, is Nico Collins just going to be one of these, like, one-year wonder flash in the pants? Like, no, this dude's just good. He's just good.
Yeah, he's their best wide receiver. He is very, very good. But again, this kind of goes to the Ravens were built to attack the middle of the Bills' front. The Texans are built to attack the edges, and the Bills are good on the edge with Benford and Rasul. Like, the Bills can compete with those two guys. It's just a better matchup for Buffalo. It's going to be fun. I can't wait to see Benford or Rasul against Diggs and Nico. Like, I think that's going to be a really, really good battle.
It'll be very, very interesting. The whole game is going to be very interesting. The Texans defense, again, has been, like, fine. It's not been anything crazy or special. I think the Bills will be able to do what they need to do. I think D'Amico Ryans is a really good head coach. I think that it will just be a very interesting game. Both of these teams really want to be able to get to 4-1 because it'll give the Texans plenty of breathing room in a very bad division right now. And for the Bills, I mean, right now the Jets are sitting at 2-2 after a brutal loss to the Broncos yesterday, where they had multiple chances to win that game. And you know what? They're going to London this week, and they're playing against an undefeated Vikings team that, I mean, you want to talk about a coaching mismatch between Nate Hackett and Brian Flores. My God. There's a real chance for the Jets to be 2-3 and the Bills to be 4-1 and pretty comfortably in control of the division the week before they play the Jets on Monday Night Football.
Yeah, this is going to sound crazy. The Bills can wrap up the division in 2 weeks. Like that, if the Bills are 5-1,
I want to make it clear. I did not say that. You said that.
I'm comfortable saying it. If the Bills are 5-1 in 2 weeks and the Jets are somehow 2-4, like the Dolphins are going nowhere. I mean, they probably aren't going to beat the Titans tonight, and the Patriots are terrible. Like, the Bills could basically be like, all right, well, we won the division. Now let's talk about seeding. And it would feel so good just to have that, because all of this offseason hearing, well, the Dolphins could be better. Well, the Jets are better. It's like, dude, no. It's still their division, despite them losing by 25 points to the Ravens yesterday. Like, the Bills are clearly the class of the AFCs.
Yes. And we knew that, or, I mean, the two of us knew that going into this season. even though we acknowledge that there's like a legitimate chance that the Jets could be a very strong team and a very dangerous playoff team if they get there. But we also knew that Nate Hackett might be too big of a bridge to cross, too big of a cross to bear for Aaron Rodgers.
He also hates his head coach too.
That's true.
And his
head coach doesn't want him to use a cadence or a very heavy cadence or whatever. So somebody, I'm gonna find this tweet and then we're gonna kind of wrap this up. But there was just the way that whole game ended for the Jets and everything that went into it. I mean, it was about as bad as you could get. And someone, let's see. Aaron Rodgers seems to get annoyed when asked about Robert Saleh's comments about dialing back the cadence on offense. Quote, "That's one way to do it. The other way is to hold them accountable." Which, Aaron Rodgers is wrong about a lot of things. He's kind of right about that.
Yeah.
And I said these two hate each other because they're both trying to be in charge of the team.
100%. 100% right.
And shocker, it's not really working out that well right now. And it's a long season, plenty of football to be played. Maybe these guys can set things aside and just acknowledge that this is going to be both of their best chances in the foreseeable future. I mean, it's going to be Rodgers' last chance to really do anything with his career. Saleh might get another chance later on in his career. Who knows? We'll see. But if they want to do something significant in terms of accomplishments in their career, it's it. You need to be able to work with these dudes. Sorry. Yeah. It doesn't really matter if you like them. You got to work with them.
And one last thing, just funny on the Jets. I did see that there was some rumors maybe the Jets will try to trade Hassan Reddick back to the Eagles. You can't. That is not allowed, which I did not know that if you make
really?
It's illegal. If you trade a player, I think Field Yates reported it, or maybe Adam Schefter, one of those guys said if you trade a player, they cannot be traded back to the same team for 2 years. Never heard that rule in my life. Never heard that rule in my life. But unless I got, in which case I'll sign off Twitter for the rest of the night happily. That is what I saw.
NFL players be traded back to their original team.
Ian Rappaport, ready? The Jet situation with Hassan Reddick still has no resolution, and some wondered if the Jets could trade him back to the Eagles. Turns out, per NFL rules, not possible. Teams can't trade a player, then reacquire him via trade until 2 years elapse. Wild.
That's wild. Crazy.
I love the Jets.
I have watched and experienced and learned a lot about football. I had no idea that was a thing. And it makes sense to me now. I mean, I wouldn't say the rule itself makes sense. I guess it does, but I mean, I guess that kind of prevents collusion or something. I don't know, but that's crazy. I did not know that was a thing. The more you know. And you know what? That's how we're going to end this show, with the Jets being miserable, just as they should be. So, thank you all for joining us tonight. It was a very lively chat tonight, and I am sorry for not getting to every single one of you, but we do appreciate you being here. We appreciate you supporting us. If you like the show, if you like this discussion, hopefully after next weekend, we're celebrating a Bills win over the Texans. You can come back and support us then. But on your way out now, you can hit the like button. You can subscribe to this channel. You can subscribe to Cover One Fantasy, where Chris Chuse is doling out fantasy info. If I had listened to him last week, I probably would have won a game that I had lost. Won't make that mistake again, because unfortunately, too many of my teams are tied to Josh Allen, and he scored 8 points last night. So, do we want to do true or rubbish? Spin's asking for true rubbish.
I mean, I know the Bills were such rubbish yesterday. I think that's about all the rubbish I need. But
gosh, I don't even. This is always hard because I always forget about true or rubbish until we get to this point, and then I feel like I can't even come up with something on the fly. Need to.
Quick one. I got a quick one.
All right, you got something? All right, we'll play the audio. Hang on. You gotta get the audio.
Let's see if it's true or rubbish. Let's go.
Let's go. Folks, if you have not played True or Rubbish before, it is a simple game in which either me or Uber in this case, will be giving me a statement, and I will say if it is true or rubbish. Uber, what do you got?
Okay. The Jets trade Hassan Reddick this season.
I'm going to say true.
This was true all after all. Can't believe it. It was true.
No, it makes me so happy. It makes me so happy.
That whole situation is so bad and so weird and so dumb.
I agree. They got to trade him.
The Jets to be miserable. I don't think they have to. Who's trading for him? Who is paying him money at this point?
No one. But they need something. Like if Joe Douglas and if they don't make the playoffs this year, Joe Douglas and Robert Saleh are getting fired. Yes. They are getting fired. So if you're Joe Douglas in particular right now, and you're like, my job is tied to us literally having a winning record this year, and I have this guy that's refusing to play for us. I need to get something. So trade him for somebody's 7th round pick this year that you think might have a shot to be on your 53. Like you have to do so. If you do nothing, you're fired. If you do something, you're probably still fired.
I don't know what to tell you, man. I don't see this happening. I mean, I want to see it happen. I think it could happen. I said true, but that's mostly just because I want to see the Jets be miserable. I just neither side in this whole thing, in this whole debacle, have any leverage because Hassan Reddick is just straight up giving away money, sitting at home doing nothing. What is Hassan Reddick doing at this point?
I don't know. What
does he do during? I mean, we're a whole month into this season, and we've heard 0 updates since like August.
He doesn't want to play for the Jets. He just doesn't want to play for them.
I understand the feeling. I wouldn't want to play for the Jets either at this point. But I think after losing a certain amount of money, I'd say I don't really care.
It's hilarious. It's only the Jets. Like only the
Truly
Jets.
Only the Jets could be
it's the best
situation like this. It's great. Oh man. All right. That's gonna be it for us. I can't think. I tried thinking of something while we were going through that. I got nothing. Yeah, that's gonna wrap it up for us tonight. Like I said, subscribe to this channel, subscribe to Cover One Fantasy, hit the like on the way out, share this with your friends, enemies, lovers, and neighbors. If you are a One Pass subscriber, thank you for supporting us. If you are not a One Pass subscriber, it is the best $60 a month that you can. No, $60 a year. $60 a year, not $60 a month. $60 a month is a lot of money. $60 a year is not a lot of money. In fact, it's very cheap considering for what you get from this deal. So sign up at cover1.net and you can get all of this wonderful information, a Discord channel that is absolutely wonderful, just everything you can think of and want out of a football community and analysis. It's totally worth it. And it's the most direct way of supporting us. Plus, you get some nice swag and a shirt from 26 Shirts, who is now a sponsor of the whole network of Cover One as a whole. And we are very grateful for them. Uber, where can the people find you?
On Twitter at UberHansen. I'm going to take a mini sabbatical from the adult beverages. And by mini sabbatical, I mean I'm going to wait till Friday. And I'm going to be a good boy Saturday so I can do all my routines on Sunday so that the Bills will win. Also, you can find me writing articles for Sports Illustrated. That's si.com/NFL/Bills. David and I both write for them. So articles dropping this week.
You can also find me on Twitter at DFAUXY. I don't know why I went with that hand. At DFAUXY. You can also find me on Buffalo Bills and SI, where I will be doing post-game recaps after each game. I did one yesterday. If you want to go there, Buffalo Bills on SI. Thank you all for supporting us. Thank you all for joining us tonight. We hope to see you next week after a Bills win. See you all then. Bye-bye.